right, we're going to give it a minute here. Please let me know if this sound is good for you. Thanks. Okay, so we've got some people. Let's see how we're doing here.
Do you want the dead animal on the thing behind you?
It's fine.
Huh?
I said that's fine.
Are you sure?
Yeah. I don't care. Hi, guys. So, I want to go through the Wooten letter and talk about what it means for the people that have already been to trial. We're all waiting for Wednesday. Can you guys hear me all right? Does it sound good? Hey, everybody. Can let me know if the sound is okay or if I sound okay. All right, so I want to go through the Wooten letter and what it means for the people that's already been through trial. And we're all waiting for Wednesday to see what the judge is going to do, see how she's going to rule on these Brady violations, the evidence that has been withheld, the Giglio violations. I mean, it's gotten ridiculous here. And I'm really glad that it's finally coming out, and I'm really glad for people like Mr. Wooten. Someone that works in the organization and they say, hey, this is not okay. These people are acting unethically and they are doing things against the law. And, you know, people like Mr. Wooten that call their coworkers out, that's what is supposed to make our system work. And we need more people like this, you know, because if everyone is allowed to just be do whatever they want to do and not have any repercussions for their actions because you work for the government, which is what we're seeing a lot of right now, right? People who work for the government, the Clintons, they have no repercussions for their actions. So they're pretty much allowed to do just about whatever they want. So Wooten writes a letter. Apparently he was the lead investigator on this. And he started seeing misconduct. And misconduct of a lot of different people. His letter is, let's see if I have 17 pages long. And you can find that and read through it. And a lot of people have read through it. And some of the things that come out of this that people are really focusing on. There's the fact that there's pictures of all the arrest pictures hung in offices, and Clive and Bundy and Eric Parker had X's through their pictures. And when I first heard that, it was very disturbing. And they also said that the people were listening especially to the individuals from Idaho's phone conversations, and they shouldn't have been. And that also really bothered me as well. But I went and looked at it, and those things are unethical. Yes, they're wrong. But there's no legal standing against them doing this. Yes, we should not have government agents who are conducting themselves in a way that they are putting pictures on the wall and drawing X's through them. That is the behavior of sociopaths and serial killers. And not something we would expect from the BLM, the FBI, the DOJ, anyone in these positions. So it's very disturbing. But once again, is it something that's prosecutable? Is it something that, you know, yes, it's misconduct on their end. But is it something here, when I read through the rest of the document, I really wanted to pick up on some things other people weren't picking up on. Because there are a lot of information in these pages. So he says he routinely observed an investigation of widespread pattern of bad judgment, lack of discipline, incredible bias, unprofessionalism and misconduct, as well as policy, ethical, and some legal violations. So as we're all seeing that, we definitely are seeing immediately the ethical issues. He's saying that when he found him, he immediately went to the supervisor, but because the supervisor was also involved in these behaviors, that he was brushed off. He's saying he's seeing a lot of actions, comments, emails from coworkers and BLM agents, and they were, in his opinion, offensive in a professional federal law enforcement work environment, and were clear violations of professional workplace norms, code of conduct, policy, and possibly even the law. And I want to focus on a lot of the parts that are possibly even the law. Because with the ethical violations, what I'm seeing, hold on 1 second. Okay, so with the ethical violations, what we're seeing is these BLM actions, these BLM agents, they're acting as a militarized force. And their commander, Dan Love, is walking around with a book that's basically like his body count book. And that's equivalent to a sniper putting little slashes on his rifle, his confirmed kills. And this is really concerning that we have an agent in the BLM who's going around with a book. And mind you, this book has people that committed suicide, possibly family members. Is that why they were listening to our phone conversations? Were they hoping that family members would commit suicide and he could add them to his kill book? And so this was not just for the ranch. This was for previous. I know in the actual emails it said something about for the Red and for the Burning Man. So it's really alarming to think that the BLM has an agent out there who is bragging about his confirmed kills, many of who committed suicide. Confirmed kills being American citizens. Let that sink in for a minute. So then we go back to what I want to focus on. And he said that it was common to receive emails, electronic communications, that were either he received or were reported to him by other persons, some of them being potential witnesses and investigative team members. So the investigative team is obviously biased, is what they're saying. But what I want to focus on is the potential witness, because we've already been through a trial. And in our trial we had 2 trials, and there was a huge array of different witnesses. And some of the things that we were always thinking is, how are these witnesses, they sound so rehearsed? And that's what I really want to go through in this person's document. He talks about potential witnesses and building their bias over and over again, and we don't get names. And I'm really, they haven't had a lot of witnesses in the current trial right now. So this is something that's just basically pertaining to the first trial that's gone through and the witnesses that actually took the stand. And what I'm looking at is malicious prosecution by Stephen Myrie, because in this email it says over and over that these things were brought to Stephen Myrie, and he was kind of doing this don't ask, don't tell. Now, I was actually at the shredding of documents hearing, and in that hearing, they definitely brought in the new investigator. And I'm not sure if that was Kent Clayman or not. I would have to go back and look into my books. But he's the individual that wrote the second memorandum of activity that's just recently gone out. And in his memorandum, he's trying to say, well, this Wooten guy, little bit of, he's upset that he was taken off, and that's where some of these come from, but he's also confirming some of Wooten's statements. And what I'm seeing here is, he's saying, well, these things are missing. There was things missing that weren't recorded, that it looks bad that they're missing. And he's saying, well, where did they go? Then they have the pictures. that are displayed all over the office where potential trial witnesses could see them. So they're creating more bias between people that weren't maybe already biased. He says his supervisor even instigated unprofessional monitoring of jail calls between defendants and their wives. And he even tried to report that misconduct, but no one listened to him. He then goes on and later says that Stephen Myrie did put a stop to that. He was told of threats of physical harm that his former BLM SAC made to his subordinate employees and family. Also, the more and more it became apparent that numerous statements made by potential trial witnesses and victims, even good officers under duress, could potentially cast an unfavorable light on the BLM. So, and mind you, this was written, let's go back, this was written, let's see, I want to say it was January or February before or during the first trial in the beginning. As the investigation went on, it became clear to me that my supervisor wasn't keeping the U.S. Attorney's Office up to date on substantial and exculpatory case findings. He then went and tried to talk to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and Stephen Myrie and Nadia Ahmed both mentioned in this email, as well as the FBI Special Agent Joel Willis, by telephone of the issues. When he did, his supervisor pretended like he had never come to them with that information. He put a note, during this investigation, my supervisor would also deceptively indicate to the prosecution team that no one else was in the room during phone calls, but he was actually on speakerphone, thereby allowing potential trial witnesses and his friends to inappropriate hear the comments of their discussions. So here we go once again. This is witness tampering. This is what we have here is BLM agents and Stephen Myrie, whether he knew it or not, over the phone, witness tampering. Or being brought knowledge of witness tampering and decided to have a don't ask, don't tell outlook on it. So on February 16th, 2017, so here we have a date, he personally informed the first assistant lead prosecutor, Stephen Myrie, of the specific comments that were made, which he had previously discussed in this, specific comments, and reminded the Special Assistant U.S. Attorney Aaron Cregan about an email chain by a particular BLM SAC in reference to the arrest of Dave Bundy. So once again here, we have Stephen Myrie and Aaron Cregan both being told about the Dave Bundy, the fact that they took his iPad and they hid it because it had evidence on it that would show the snipers, that would show the BLM's heavy-handedness. And he says, wouldn't this be exculpatory evidence and the defense need to be given to the defense counsel? And Stephen Myrie said something like, we do now, or it is now. Like, very frustrated that this was brought to him. Through the two trials that I sat through, again and again, these witnesses came on the stand, and they sounded rehearsed. They definitely did Dan Love's famous "I don't recall" whenever it was a question they weren't supposed to touch on. Could listening to Stephen Myrie's phone conversations with the lead investigator in charge have helped them get to that point? We were also told that there were no snipers, and so Eric didn't have none of the tier 3 that went in the first trial had a self-defense defense. So therefore, we couldn't claim self-defense. There was no reason in the government's mind to assault federal officers. And now it's come out that there is proof of snipers. But not only has it come out that there was proof of snipers, it comes out that Stephen Myrie, Aaron Cregan, Nadia Ahmed, Joel Willis, they all knew that there were snipers. They withheld this information. They maliciously prosecuted all of these men, trying to do anything they could to get a win. And what I'd like to see is something happen about this. I want to, yes, they can dismiss the case for Tier 1 and Tier 2 that haven't finished their trial yet, Tier 1 that's in trial now. But what about these guys that were literally maliciously prosecuted by Stephen Myrie and his team, by the FBI agents in the courtroom? I saw it when I was in there. They'd have a good day. They were doing fist bumps in front of the jury, in front of the judge. We weren't even allowed to look at each other, mouth I love you, smile. And they're over there doing fist bumps. He says back to the letter, he says after he talked to Stephen Myrie and them, he was ordered to not contact the U.S. Attorney's Office, even on his own time with his personal phone. And they actually went through and took him off the case, went through his office, took items out of his safe that were items, probably pictures, emails, all of the things that he had collected on the misconduct and these things. They removed them all. He also states that they also removed personal items of his. So he's saying not only are they acting unconstitutionally with misconduct, but they're doing it to their own agents. And they are colluding people into joining their group and joining their evil actions, their unlawful actions. So, and if you don't, you're kicked out. You don't have a job. He writes that in multiple times in this email, that it was do what we say, write it how we want it wrote, or else you don't have a job. He is convinced he was removed to prevent the ethical and proper further disclosure of severe misconduct. Their failure to correct and report, and the cover-up by BLM OLES supervisor. His supervisor told him that Stephen Myrie furiously demanded that he be removed from the case and mentioned something about the BLM, specifically my supervisor, not turning over or disclosing discovery-related material. And he says that's true. He had issues with the BLM not following its own enabling statute. So it sounds like Stephen Myrie to me frivolously demanding. He called Eric Parker a slithering coward in court. Tell me that's not making it personal. This gentleman has made it personal from the very beginning. Let's talk about Todd Engel. Todd Engel was stripped of his right, his constitutional right to represent himself, because Stephen Myrie and the FBI and the rest of the prosecution team were lying and withholding exculpatory evidence, Brady material, Giglio violations. So as much as they want to, continue like, oh, well, maybe we caught this early enough that we can just do a mistrial and put it off a couple months and then it's not an issue. No, it's an issue. This trial needs to be dismissed. And we need to look at what happened in the first two trials. And we need to look at prosecuting Stephen Myrie and some FBI agents and BLM and a lot of BLM agents, because we are only making this type of behavior, regular behavior, in our federal government if these people are not held accountable. Wooten just wanted the misconduct to stop, the necessity and the required actions to be taken, and I wanted to make sure these issues wouldn't create a fatal error, which they have, in this case, and further undermine our agency's mission. This is what we need. More people like Wooten in our government, in our police force, in our judicial system, because there was one part in his letter that he read that he said, it's not that he sided with them. with the Bundys and the protesters. He believed in the justice system. I believed in the justice system before we got there. And what I saw when we got into that courtroom was so wrong. It was so different than everything I've ever been taught or told growing up, that it really just shook my core. And he said he also specifically asked the office to provide oversight to Mr. Myrie and his team regarding the affirmative responsibility to seek out evidence favorable to the accused, not to discourage the reporting of case issues and suspected misconduct, to report and act on suspected civil rights violations, to not retaliate against agents that do so, their required duty. He also asked that the office ensure that the prosecution team is free of bias and has ethically and correctly turned over exculpatory evidence to the defense. Mind you, this was sent back during in the first weeks of the very first trial. So people on the prosecution team, in the FBI, in the DOJ have had this information and not done anything about it. And that trial was able to go through. Then the next trial, which even got worse, was able to go through. And now we are only seeing it in this third trial, because when they talked about the destruction of evidence, these items were then new evidence given over. And this is Brady violations, Giglio violations, but this is also malicious prosecution on all of these guys. And people need to start being held accountable for this. He then goes to say, in regards to the prosecution team misconduct, I believe some of it may be attributed to simple mistakes or poor judgment. However, I believe it's unlikely, if my supervisor's statements to me are true, that Mr. Myrie himself wasn't acting himself unethically and inappropriately. Prior to the last few weeks of his investigation, he held Stephen Myrie in the highest regards. He says he's extremely hard worker and very intelligent. However, I feel that his judgment is likely clouded by extreme personal and religious bias. He called Eric Parker a slithering coward in court and a desire to win the case at all costs. He feels that his willingness to ignore and fail to report exculpatory material, extreme bias, and act unethically and possibly deceitfully to win. This was turned in and yet ignored. He came to believe that discovery-related and possibly relevant and substantial trial impeachment and bias-related or exculpatory information wasn't likely turned over or properly disclosed to the prosecution team by his supervisor. He believes these issues would shock the conscience of the public and greatly embarrass the agency if they were disclosed. Additionally, it should be noted that I was also personally subject to whistleblowing discouragement, retaliation, and intimidation. And if he was, you know, these witnesses that took the stand were also. Does that also go to the Nevada Highway Patrol when they came in and lied and perjured themselves on the stand? Were they also intimidated into their testimonies? Does it also go to Metro Police, who also got on the stand and perjured themselves? Were they also intimidated into doing so by the prosecuting team and by the FBI? This is all things that need to be looked into immediately. Unfortunately, I also believe that the U.S. Attorney's Office prosecution team may have adopted an inappropriate, under-the-table, unofficial policy of preferred ignorance in regard to the likely gross misconduct on the part of the senior management from the BLM's law office, enforcement and security discovery relating to exculpatory-related trial issues. So all of the information that we were supposed to be given before we went to trial, no one was given. Stephen Myrie the FBI, Aaron Cregan, Nadia Ahmed, they all knew about it. Even Daniel Sheese, he knew about it. It actually talks about Sheese in the emails as well, and about how his inappropriate and biased behavior. Now, I have heard rumors that Sheese was in the courtroom at some point during those two trials, and he actually made derogatory comments about Carol and Jeanette Finicum. And that behavior is mimicked by every BLM officer written in these pages. And what I'd like to know is we'd like some names, because I guarantee you those people took the stand and perjured themselves in the first two trials. A man was sentenced to 68 years in prison. I might have that a little off. Based on this trial, and not given evidence, exculpatory evidence that would have saved him. Another man has been found guilty of 2 charges and is facing, they want to throw all these crazy years at him, like over, between 20 and 30 years. And he had his constitutional rights stomped all over because he was not given this evidence, and because of malicious prosecution by the FBI, by the BLM, and by the U.S. Attorney's Prosecuting Office. Did the judge know this all the time? I used to think that, she knew and she had all of this information, but her actions lately have been swaying me a little to the other side. But I won't fully believe it until she dismisses this case for all of these people, and then starts looking into Stephen Myrie, Joel Willis, all of these FBI agents, these BLM agents. We want names with this. And I'm, like I saw someone else, I'm super happy to see, we've got it in the media, we've got it all over the place. We have our representatives here in Idaho. We finally got them on board after the trial, because their famous words are, well, we can't get involved in a trial that's currently going. They can't get involved. They have to wait till it's over. And so we go in between trials and we talk to them again. And we finally, at the end of this last trial, got them, a third. They were trying these guys for a third time, and we got them to be able to get together. And Dorothy Moon really helped on that. And we actually had Raul Labrador's office looking into this, because they are a judicial committee looking at the judicial system. And we actually went back and talked to them after we saw this come out, and they said they are going to Zinke, to the Department of the Interior, all the way up, and bringing this up, because something needs to happen. These people need to be held accountable. And what I can say for everyone is, you can talk to your representatives and say the same thing. Take this letter in and be like, this is happening, and if it's happening in Idaho and it's happening in Nevada, you can guarantee it's happening in your state. And we need to talk about this. We need them to write and say, this is not okay, and you need to prosecute. Because